how much the average American pays in interest every single month. Laptop open, doing something that millions of Americans do every single month. You're making your minimum payments. Mortgage? Done. Car payment? Done. Student loan? Done. Credit card? Done. You close the laptop, feel vaguely responsible, maybe even a little proud of yourself, and then you go to bed. What you don't do, what almost nobody does, is add up what you just paid. Not the principal, not the part that actually reduces what you owe, the interest. The part that goes straight to the lender and does exactly nothing for you. Because here's what most people think about when they think about their finances. They think about what they earn. They think about what they spend. Some of them even track what they save. But almost nobody sits down and adds up what they pay every single year just for the privilege of borrowing money they already spent. It's like having a second rent, except this landlord doesn't fix anything, doesn't maintain the property, doesn't provide anything at all. You just write the check and the money disappears. And the total on that check is going to make you put down whatever you're drinking right now. My name is Tim, and I spend way too much time thinking about money, debt psychology, and the specific ways that financial systems extract wealth from people who are just trying to live their lives. If you want to understand where your money is actually going, instead of just watching your balance never seem to move, hit subscribe and give this video a like, because by the end of it, you'll see your entire financial life through a completely different lens. Here's what we're doing today. We're going to go category by category through every major type of debt the average American carries, calculate the actual annual interest cost of each one, add them up into a single number, and then I'm going to show you what that number could have become if it was working for you instead of against you. And fair warning, the math is not going to be kind. Before we get into the numbers, let's make sure we're speaking the same language, because there's one concept here that people think they understand, but almost always blur in their head. When you borrow money, you pay it back two ways: principal, which is the actual amount you borrowed, and interest, which is the fee you pay for borrowing it. Every month when you make a payment, some of it reduces your balance and some of it goes directly to the lender as profit. In the early years of a long loan, that split is not what most people imagine. On a standard 30-year mortgage, your first monthly payment is roughly 80% interest and 20% principal. You're spending $4 reducing what you owe for every $1 that actually dents the balance. The lender gets paid first. You get the leftovers. And here's the part most people never actually visualize. Interest isn't just a line item on your monthly statement. It's an annual number. It accumulates over 12 months. And when you add up what you've paid across every single debt you're carrying, you get a number that most people have never seen written down in one place. So let's write it down. We're going to build this number piece by piece. Think of it like a running tab. By the end, you'll see the full bill.
Category 1. Mortgage interest. For most American homeowners, the mortgage is the biggest financial commitment of their lives. The average mortgage balance in the United States right now sits at roughly $244,000. And with 30-year fixed rates sitting in the mid to upper 6% range for the last couple of years, the average rate on an active mortgage is sitting around 6.8%. Let's do the math on that. In the first year of a $244,000 mortgage at 6.8%, you'll pay approximately $16,500 in interest. $16,500. Not toward your home, not toward your equity, straight to the bank for letting you borrow the money in the first place. To put that in human terms, that's $1,375 per month just in interest on your mortgage, before your property taxes, before your insurance, before your maintenance budget, before a single other cost of owning the house. The $130.75 is just the fee.
And here's what makes this even harder to sit with. Because mortgage interest is baked into your monthly payment, and nobody sends you a separate bill that says, here's how much you paid us in pure interest this month, most people have no idea how much they're actually paying. It hides in plain sight, inside a number you've become numb to.
Running interest tab, $16,500 per year. Category 2, auto loan interest rate. The average American auto loan balance right now is sitting around $23,000. The average interest rate on a new auto loan is hovering around 8%. Used cars are even higher, pushing into the 10s and sometimes 12s, because a lender's price in more risk when the asset they're lending against is depreciating faster. At $23,000 and 8%, you're paying roughly $1,800 per year in auto loan interest. $1,800 per year to borrow money to buy something that is actively losing value while you pay for the privilege of owning it. The car depreciates, the interest accumulates. Both are working against you simultaneously. And most people replace their car before the loan is paid off and roll the remaining balance into the next loan, which means this interest payment isn't a 5-year problem. For a lot of households, it's a permanent feature of their budget. One car loan ends and another begins without a single month of breathing room. Running interest tab, $18,300 per year.
Category 3, credit card interest. This is where things get genuinely ugly. We've talked about credit card debt on this channel before. The average household carrying a credit card balance owes somewhere around $9,000. And the average interest rate on that balance is currently above 22%. 22%. Let me be very clear about what that number means, because it's easy to say 22% and not really feel it. If you have $9,000 in credit card debt and you're making minimum payments, you are paying approximately $1,990 per year, call it $2,000, in interest alone. That's $165 a month going directly to the credit card company before you've paid down a single dollar of the actual balance. And if you're only making minimum payments, the balance barely moves, so you'll be paying that $165 for years. But here's what makes credit card interest categorically different from mortgage or auto loan interest. At least with those, you have an asset. Your house might appreciate. Your car gets you to work. Credit card debt, for most people, represents money already spent on things that no longer exist. The dinner was eaten. The clothes are in the closet. The online purchase arrived, was fine, and is now forgotten. But the interest on those decisions keeps showing up every single month, like an uninvited house guest who insists on being fed. Running interest tab, $20,300 per year.
Category 4, student loan interest rate in America sits at roughly $38,000 per year in interest. Average interest rate on federal loans, depending on when they were taken out and what type they are, runs somewhere around 6 to 7%. Let's use 6.5% as a reasonable middle. At $38,000 and 6.5%, you're paying about $2,470 per year in interest. Call it $2,500. And here's the particular cruelty of student loan interest that sets it apart from the others. With a mortgage, you can at least look at a building that appreciates over time. With a car loan, you have a vehicle in the driveway. Student loans were taken out in exchange for a degree and a job that, for millions of people, never quite materialized the way the brochure suggested. You borrowed $38,000 to access the job market. The job you got pays $52,000 per year before taxes. Your loan payment is $400 per month, of which about $200 is pure interest. And the degree that was supposed to be the investment is now just the entry price of a career that doesn't pay enough to retire the debt in any reasonable timeline. $2,500 per year in student loan interest is almost exactly the cost of 1 month's rent in a medium-cost American city, paid every year for a decision you made when you were 18 years old. Running interest tab, $22,800 per year.
Category 5, personal loan interest rate. This one is less talked about, but increasingly common. Americans are taking out personal loans at a growing rate, using them to cover emergency expenses, consolidate other debt, finance home repairs, or bridge gaps between income and life. The average personal loan balance sits around $11,000.
The average interest rate is around 12%. At $11,000 and 12%, you're paying approximately $1,320 per year in interest. Call it $1,300.
Personal loans exist on the spectrum between credit cards and secured debt. They're cheaper than credit cards, which is why people often use them to consolidate. But they're more expensive than mortgages, and they're almost always taken out during a moment of financial stress, which means the people paying the most in personal loan interest are typically the people who can least afford to. Running interest tab, $24,100 per year. Okay, let's stop and look at the tab. Mortgage interest, $16,500. Auto loan interest, $1,800. Credit card interest, $2,000. Student loan interest, $2,500. Personal loan interest, $1,300. Total annual interest paid, $24,100. $2,000 per month. Not buying anything, not building equity, not investing, not saving, not eating or driving or living, just paying for the cost of having borrowed money. $24,100 per year in pure interest. If you read that number and felt a kind of hollow, slow-sinking feeling in your chest, that's the correct response. That's the number working on you the way it should. But before we go further, let me be precise about something, because I can already hear the objection forming. Not every American carries all 5 of these debt types simultaneously. Maybe you don't have a student loan. Maybe you rent instead of own. Maybe you paid off your car. Fair enough. But here's what the data actually shows. 2/3 of American adults carry at least 2 types of debt simultaneously. And for the roughly 64% of Americans who own their homes, the mortgage alone is $16,500 per year in interest. Add one car loan and you're at $18,300. Add a credit card balance and you're above $20,000 before you've even touched a student loan or a personal loan. The point isn't that every single person is paying exactly $24,100. The point is that the average American household, running a completely normal life with a house and a car and some debt from school and a credit card balance they haven't quite paid off, is easily paying $15,000 to $24,000 per year in pure interest without ever thinking of it as a single number. And that number has a name. I call it the interest drain. Quick favor before we go deeper. If this is adding up in a way that's making you see your finances differently, hit the like button. It tells the algorithm that people actually want to understand where their money goes. Back to it. Now, let's zoom out for a second, because this is where things go from personal to staggering. What if you added up the interest drain across every American household simultaneously? Americans collectively pay over $500 billion per year in consumer interest alone. That's credit cards, auto loans, student loans, and personal loans before you add a single dollar of mortgage interest. Add mortgage interest, and the total annual interest paid by American households crosses $1 trillion. $1 trillion per year, just in interest. For perspective, the entire U.S. defense budget, the biggest military budget in the history of human civilization, is around $900 billion. Americans pay more in interest every year than we spend on the Army, the Navy, the Air Force, the Marines, the Coast Guard, the Space Force, and every aircraft carrier, fighter jet, and nuclear submarine combined. We are collectively writing a check to lenders every year that is larger than the check we write to defend the entire country. And nobody talks about it. It doesn't show up on the news. There's no national conversation about it. It just happens, month by month, household by household, minimum payment by minimum payment, in absolute silence. Carville once said he wanted to come back as the bond market because you can intimidate everybody. The consumer lending industry doesn't need to intimidate anybody. It just needs everyone to keep making the minimum payment and never add up the annual total.
Now, here's the part of this video that I want you to sit with for a minute, because this is where the number goes from depressing to genuinely transformative if you let it. There were two sides to compound interest. You've heard compound interest described as the eighth wonder of the world. Money growing on top of money, returns generating their own returns, wealth building quietly in the background while you sleep. Every personal finance book, every investing video, every retirement ad sells you the beautiful version of compound interest. But compound interest doesn't care whose side it's on.
When you carry debt, compound interest works for the lender. When you invest, compound interest works for you. And the difference between which side you're on is the entire ballgame. Here's what that $24,100 per year in interest could have become. If instead of paying $24,100 in annual interest to lenders, you invested that same $24,100 every year and earned an average 8% return, which is roughly in line with long-term stock market averages, here is what you would have after 30 years. $2.7 million. $2,700,000. From the money that is currently disappearing into interest payments every year, money you are already spending, money that is already leaving your household. It's just currently flowing in the wrong direction. This is what wealthy people mean when they say they let money work for them. It's not a personality trait. It's not a mindset. It's a mathematical reality. People who are building wealth are mostly on the right side of compound interest. People who aren't building wealth are mostly on the wrong side of it. And the brutal irony is that the poorer you are, the higher your interest rates, which means the more aggressively compound interest works against you just when you can least afford it. The interest rate on a mortgage for someone with excellent credit, 6.5%. The interest rate on a credit card for someone with struggling credit, 29%. The system is designed to extract more from the people who have less, and it does exactly that, quietly, automatically, every single month, while most people are focused on the balance instead of the rate.
So what do you actually do with all of this? Because I'm not going to leave you staring at a $24,000 number and just tell you that compound interest is theoretically beautiful. Let's be specific. There are really only 3 moves in this game, and the order matters. Step 1. Make the interest drain visible. This sounds too simple to be useful. It isn't. Right now, most people's relationship with their interest payments is fragmented. The mortgage payment happens on the 1st. The car payment happens on the 15th. The credit card minimum is whatever the app says. Nobody sees these as a unified annual number. Here's what I want you to do. Get a piece of paper or open a spreadsheet. List every debt you carry. Write down the balance and the interest rate next to each one. Multiply the balance by the rate and write down the annual interest for each one. Then add them up. Write that total number down somewhere you'll see it. This is your annual interest drain. This is what the invisible rent actually costs. Once you see it as a single number, your entire framework for financial decisions changes. Because right now, you might be asking yourself whether you can afford a $500 vacation. The better question is whether you can afford to keep paying $20,000 per year to lenders. Step 2. Attack the highest rate first. This is the debt avalanche, and it is the most mathematically efficient way to reduce your interest drain. List your debts from highest interest rate to lowest. Pay the minimums on everything. Then take every extra dollar you can find and throw it at the highest rate debt until it's gone. Then redirect everything to the next one. The reason this works is simple. Every dollar you put toward a 22% credit card balance earns you a guaranteed 22% return. That's better than Warren Buffett's long-term average. You cannot invest your way to a better return than the return you get from eliminating high-interest debt. The math is not close. And here's the psychological shift that happens when people actually do this. The first debt that goes away feels almost like getting a raise, because it is. That minimum payment you were making every month is now available to be redirected. Your monthly cash flow just improved. The drain got a little smaller, and that momentum is real. Step 3. Shift from interest payer to interest earner. This is the long game, and it's the only game that actually matters. Right now, if you are carrying net debt, which means you owe more than you have in savings and investments, you are an interest payer. Money flows out of your household to lenders every month. That is your financial identity, whether you chose it or not. The goal is to become an interest earner, someone whose assets generate more passive income than their liabilities cost in interest. When you cross that line, the entire dynamic flips. Instead of compound interest running against you, it runs for you. Instead of your money disappearing into someone else's balance sheet, it accumulates in yours. This does not happen overnight. It does not happen from one good financial decision. It happens from a sustained, consistent shift in the direction money flows inside your household. But it starts with seeing the drain for what it actually is. Not a car payment, not a mortgage payment, not a minimum balance, an annual number. Here's the thing that strikes me most about all of this, and it's the reason I wanted to make this video. The interest drain is not a secret. The math is not hidden. Your lenders send you statements every month that contain all the information you need to calculate exactly what you're paying. It's just never organized for you in a way that makes the total visible. Banks don't send you an annual summary that says, this year you paid us $16,500 in mortgage interest, $1,800 in auto loan interest, and $2,000 in credit card interest. Your total interest payments to us this year were $20,300. Have a great year. They don't do that, and you can understand why they don't. But you can do it yourself, and once you do it once you see the full annual number written down in one place, you cannot unsee it. Every financial decision you make after that is filtered through a different lens. Not, can I afford the monthly payment, but what is this actually costing me per year? And what could that money become if it was working for me instead? That's the shift. That's the whole thing. Not a budget trick, not a savings hack, not an investment strategy, just the simple act of making the invisible visible. Because you cannot fight a drain you refuse to measure. The average American is paying somewhere between $15,000 and $24,000 per year in pure interest. Collectively, we're paying more in interest than we spend on national defense. And the only people who benefit from you not knowing that number are the people you're paying it to. Now you know the number. The question is what you're going to do with it. I'll see you in the next one.